You're listening to the Full Circle Music Show, the why of the music biz. Welcome back to the Full Circle Music Show. This is Chris Murphy, sitting beside Mr. Seth Mosley. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Thanks for being with me today.
Man, it's my pleasure. It's also a pleasure to have Brown Bannister on the show. Wow, what a legend. Literally created a genre.
It is pretty amazing. The genre that I happen to grow up listening to, and probably without knowing it is a big reason why I'm even in music nowadays.
If you're not familiar with Brown, he's produced everybody from Amy Grant, Stephen Curtis Chapman, CeCe Winans. He's won how many Grammys? How many dubs?
25 dubs and 14 Grammy Awards.
What? That sounds impossible, but it's not, because Brown has done it in his storied career.
Brown actually had to strengthen the floor joists in his house just to hold all of those in one of the rooms. He was telling us about that.
That's pretty amazing. I can't wait to listen to it. Also, his daughter, Ellie Holcomb.
Fantastic artist. Check her out. One thing that I really took away from this show was his story of working with his daughter on her record and how that brought some redemption to their relationship. So check that out. This is a really powerful episode.
Mr. Brown Bannister, thanks for being with us on the Full Circle Music Show.
We wanted to have you here because you've been around a time or two here in the industry.
Yeah,
and
I'm 93 years old.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying experience.
Me and Ralph Carmichael.
But would just love to hear, again, knowing what I know about you, was this all kind of an experiment when you first sat down as a producer? What was the question that got you behind the boards there?
Well, I don't know what you want to know. You may not want to know some of this, but no, really, I was pre-med.
Really?
So I in college I was. Oh yeah, I'll turn this off.
I like that. It's background music.
Yeah, that's good. I was pre-med in college, and I never really even was aware there was a music business. So the extent of my music training was some piano lessons and growing up in a Church of Christ where we sang a cappella music. Sure. So you learn to sing harmony.
Gotcha.
That was it.
Yeah.
And that's still about how qualified I am to do what I'm doing.
I don't know about that.
Or do what I've done, but no, not really. But it was just kind of it was really kind of on the heels of more of a spiritual kind of like wake-up call.
Sure. At
college. I dropped out. I ended up I won't bore you with the details, but ended up coming to Nashville and just fell in love with Nashville and this church down on Music Row and just, I don't know. It was an amazing experience, just life-wise. And it was so amazing. I just decided not to be a doctor. I was going to be in social work or just something helping people. I'd worked with inner city kids here. When I went back, I took this aptitude test my parents asked me to take because I was 3.5 years into the pre-med program. So they were like, maybe you ought to get some input. And when I finished this test, after 3 days of testing, they said you should be in some area of music composition.
Really?
Yeah.
That was from your parents.
Well, that was the testing place.
Wow.
They said, you have, everybody they can do lots of things, but that's the strongest suit. And it was just so absurd to my parents and me. We just totally wrote it off as a waste of money and time. And I went back and majored in mass communications, got job offers when I graduated a year and a half later in ministry to, an associate pastor in a campus ministry thing. And a friend of mine had moved to Nashville and said, you love Nashville, just come to Nashville. You love the church, you love, we can figure out something. I'm like, what am I going to do? He said, well, I'll get you a job at Opryland. And he got me a job at Opryland back when they had music.
Yep.
And I became part of this bluegrass band, had no idea what I was doing, and, playing mandolin and fiddle and bass and guitar, and really didn't know how to play half of those. I'll let you guess which ones. And then he said, I'm going to get a production deal. And he said, why don't you learn how to engineer? I went to Belmont College, and I was in Belmont College for about, I don't know, a few weeks, this is a tape machine. This is a microphone. Wow. This is how you plug this in, that kind of sort of basic level. And he got a deal with Word Records and said, hey, the gear's coming out this week. Just come on out. I'm like, I don't know how to engineer. And he said, that's okay, man. We'll just wing it. And, you know, so much of being in music is winging it. And so we started. The first thing I did was I engineered this album on this. He was a pop artist who had become a Christian, wanted to make like a faith kind of born again. You know, he'd been born again. He wanted to make a faith album. A guy named B.J. Thomas, and you know he'd had tons of #1 hits and stuff. And so he's coming in. It happened so fast. It's kind of hard to remember.
Sure,
but I got to tell you this little story because it's really funny. So I'm sitting here at the console. I've never been at a console before. And we had a friend of Chris's, Kyle Lenning, who you may have heard of, Jason Lenning, but this is his dad, and he was a pretty well-known engineer. So he had him come out and get a drum sound and kind of set things up, and I just copied all the settings down on the legal pad. Kyle Lenning's recipe for drums, and just tried to, you know, like recreate. Well, the problem is he had a Rogers set with 2 toms, and Larry London, who was like the A-list guy, came in with like 4 toms. I mean, just like this massive kit. And so I just sort of averaged the mics out and, you know, just sort of like pointed them in the general direction. Anyway, so I'm sitting there, and here's B.J. Thomas, who, you know, has had hits. He's worked with like the best, you know, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, Hooked on a Field, you know, all those. He's coming from that world. And literally you come into this studio in a basement, and literally you can't stand up in the control room. Wow. And BJ's like 6'3", you know, he's tall. And we had Larry London, we had Joe Osborne, who played on Bridge Over Troubled Water. We had Reggie Young, who came up with a hook on Drift Away, Dobie Gray. Gosh. I mean, this was like the A-list. And here I am engineering and quotes. And about 10 minutes in, Larry London, who was this big guy, he's passed now, but it's big guy and a big presence in the studio. And I can't do a Jersey accent, but he kind of had this, you know, accent. And he was like, "Hey, who's the engineer?" And Brown Bannister, you know, "Hey Brown, can you put some like 10K or something on the snare? It just sounds like shit." And I waved at him, the windows here. I leaned my head on the console and said, "Lord, what is 10K?" I have no idea what he's talking about. So I did the whole, you know, pretend to twist the knob and, you know, all that. So that's where I started. And then the second thing that happened is I was a volunteer youth pastor at my church, and this little girl came up to me and at a retreat and said, "Hey, I want to play you some songs, and can you help me? I know you're going to Belmont." Well, I was sort of going to Belmont, and, you know, could you help me make a tape for my parents? And we did, and I took the tape to my friend Chris, who had the production deal, and he called Stan Mosier at Word Records over the phone, played this cassette. "Hey, I think we got something here. Okay, sign her." I mean, it was like literally nobody met anybody, and that was Amy Grant. And so he turns to me after that phone call and says, "Hey, you want to produce it?" I said, "Well, I don't know how to produce." He said, "You don't know how to engineer." And we just won a Grammy or whatever, you know, like, you know, it was the first gold record in Christian music, BJ's was. And so anyway, so that's kind of started to that's what got me into producing. So there's your long answer to a short question.
My favorite part of that story is, "Lord, what is 10K?
What is 10K? I should make a plaque."
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't really make plaques these days.
So did you have any moments when you went home from those sessions where, like, I've got to go by a bookstore and figure out some of this stuff?
No.
In order to...
It was going too fast. I mean, he was doing just project after... I mean, it was just... I rarely left the studio.
Sure.
Like, he had a loft. I slept in the loft all the time. And I was... I was known as... I always wore overalls. you know, where they have you can put the like square pencil, has a pencil little deal and overalls. I kept my toothbrush there because I was like always at the studio.
Wow.
So anyway, it was just, that was my life. I didn't
why
really.
Are you not wearing overalls now?
I moved past that phase.
Okay.
I have moved past that phase.
Like 2008.
Although I still, Mark Nicholas sent me after some Mercy Me record we did, I'd told him we were talking about old days, and he did send me a pair of overalls.
That's awesome.
A really great pair, too. So I pull them out on special occasions. I should have done that.
To go to the dump.
No, I would have done it to come to this interview if I'd known.
Well, that's amazing from my perspective that, okay, we're sitting here in a room with a guy who effectively was one of the guys who started a genre of music, contemporary Christian music. And he says, no, we were just winging it. That's pretty amazing to me. And I think for a lot of the listeners out there who are like, okay, before I jump into this music thing, do I have to have all this education and figure it out and know this and know how to compress a microphone or how to write a hit song? I'm not hearing you say that at all.
No. I mean, I wouldn't have minded having some knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not opposed to knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, it would have been great. I think all of it's good. You know, whatever path you end up, you know, it's just walking through the open doors. Is you know, what's in front of you now? Well, I don't know anybody in music. I don't live in a music town. I don't have an artist I can work with, or I'm not an artist or whatever, but I really want to do this. Well, then knowledge is probably good, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's more about who you meet and what doors that opens and what each thing leads to. It's more about that, as you guys know too, you know?
Sure.
How long was it when you were pushed in there to the fact, how long was it from the starting point when you first walked in there and started, quote unquote, engineering and producing until you felt competent at it?
Let's see. That was 1976 or I can't remember. I think it was 1976. When did I feel competent? I don't know. I think, honestly, I think about 4 years into it, I literally lived in that studio, and then I got an opportunity to produce this girl, Debbie Boone. And I don't know why I wanted to do it, but I thought, man, she lives in L.A., maybe I should go to L.A. And I ended up going to L.A., and I got the name of somebody out there that was a young kind of like beginning engineer, but supposed to be good. He had apprenticed with Bill Schnee, and who's like one of the classic, like amazing sort of heroes of engineering. And his name was Jack Joseph Puig, and he was kind of working out of this studio called Martin Sound. And so I talked to him, and he kind of hooked me up with musicians there. And really, when I walked into the control room and he was getting drum sounds, two things happened. He's a Spaniard, and I don't know if you ever met him or whatever. He's quite the personality. Yeah. He's really, really funny.
Hopefully we can have him on the show sometime.
Yeah, you might have to go to L.A. though.
That's okay.
But you know,
we'll make a trip.
I think this setup could travel.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know. Anyway, I walked into the control room, met him, and he was getting sounds and stuff. I walked out to the studio to introduce myself to a couple of musicians, and came back in, and literally, so I'm walking into the control room. So the door's on the side, and it's like a long console, long Neve console, and then you walk right and go behind the console. Well, literally, I walked in, turned right, the door closes, and bam! I mean, this like crashing sound, over my left shoulder, and I look around, and there's this telephone that's like in 100 pieces.
Oh no!
And literally, I look up kind of wide-eyed, and Jack's just kind of like, his hair's like this, and he's kind of like fuming and stuff, and I'm like, whoa, what was that about? He said, man, expletive deleted, KM54, the KM54s on the toms, one of them just keeps, fritzing out. It's not working. Okay.
And you're talking about microphones for
yes,
for
talking
this.
about a microphone.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like a tube,
yeah.
little pencil mic,
Sure.
but they're really great mics. And I said, so okay. And he said, the owner of the studio said, there's a lot of expensive stuff in here, and if you ever get mad and you need to throw something, throw the phone. Which I thought, I'm like, and also the part B to that is make sure the producer isn't walking in the door when you throw it. Yeah. But honestly, I went in and I heard, he had apprenticed under Bill Schnee, who'd done Dire Straits and Boz Scaggs, and everybody, just like all these amazing sounding recordings. And I walked in and heard the drum sound, and I knew what I'd been doing for 4 years in the basement of Chris's house, Chris Christian. I knew what I'd been doing, and I walked in and heard this, and I was like, I am a producer, not an engineer. And I realized at that point, that there really were people who were experts. And this is in the day, this is, it's different today,
Sure.
Not that there aren't experts, but, just the way you make records, it was totally different. But I realized, man, this is like a whole new level of engineering. And all the musicians, this was back with Bradshaw racks, guitar players, just bringing in all this incredible equipment and outboard stuff. And everything, just, not that Nashville wasn't great, but this was pop music. So
Yeah, sure.
it just raised the bar. And I think at that point, I realized I really should focus on producing. So it was kind of that, I felt like it was at that point I really started transitioning into settling into the fact that I'm a producer.
Gotcha.
So I need to get comfortable with that. And I think in the last 5 years, I've gotten comfortable,
That's pretty good. 1977 to 2007-ish.
Yeah.
2000,
30 years.
Good 30
maybe
years.
2010.
So I'm hearing you say never stop learning, never stop getting better.
Oh my goodness. I'm joking, like, hey, can I come intern for you? But really, I would love to intern. I would love to, because I never, like Jericho, he gets the opportunity to just be here in the atmosphere.
Yeah,
Sure.
I just started, and like I'm supposed to know what I'm doing, and I
Right.
never got to be in anybody else's atmosphere. So
Yeah.
there's a real sense in, oh man, I would love to go back and like be under people and just support them and watch and listen and
Sure.
learn. It'd be amazing.
Well, I get the sense nowadays that the magic of apprenticeship has sort of faded away because
Yeah.
you have your not to attach any negativity to it, but you have your Full Sails and you have your Berkeleys and your degrees that people will come out with those and what we've kind of sensed is there's almost a little bit of an entitlement thing where, hey, I graduated with this degree. This is what I know. This is what I'm going to teach you. And this is, I'm here to get and not to give as
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
and to learn. So,
I've seen that same trend,
yeah.
and it's just sort of the reality. It just kind of comes with that turf.
Sure. So what would
Not
you...
that everybody's like that.
Sure.
Because
sure.
I have, the essence of being a producer, as you know, is you're there to serve. It's all about being a servant. It's not about me. It's about the artist. It's about the company, whoever that sort of team of influencers is around the artist. You're there to serve them. So I've found that people who want to apprentice, who want to start, who want to know how do I get from point A to point B and C and so on, the ones that have a servant's heart and are open and teachable and just there to help, I think those people really win. I think they tend to go forward. Not that you can't be Mozart and a genius and, hey, I'm going to, be a bull in a china shop, because there's that too, taking initiative and just being proactive and stuff. But, at the end of the day, I've been doing this 40 years, and it's not about me. It's not about my career. It's not about my definition of success. It's like learning how success is defined in the current context and with that artist. And then what can I do? You know, it's like, what is a producer? A producer is kind of like a general contractor, kind of like an architect, but you're also a pastor and a friend and, you know, a social worker and, you know, you're having interventions sometimes. And, you know, there's so many other dimensions to it. So, yeah.
Gosh.
I've always thought that we should have an alternate title called a SPE, a suicide prevention engineer. Very many times.
That's awesome.
I feel like that we are starting to form a little theme here at the Full Circle Music Show.
On the second episode.
It's
awesome.
Pretty great that we've talked to a couple people at this point, Seth included, and almost everybody that we talk to talks about that they are a servant to the song or to the artist.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
It's just one of the fundamental truths.
Yeah. But I would think, and again, from almost an outsider's perspective looking in, that it's almost the opposite of that, that it's all ego-driven, and it's people fighting their way to make sure that their sound or their feel is heard on the record, whereas what I'm hearing from people who have found great success in the industry is it's the opposite of the ego. It's the servant heart that really is the...
It can be, yeah. I mean, you run across all types, you know? I mean, there are those that it is... I mean, you just know it is about them, you know? So it just kind of, you know, it just depends on what your worldview is.
Yeah.
And
it's a really simple fact that I always go back to is life. Go ahead.
Wait, on that, I think what you're saying, I agree with and resonate with. It's like, I think longevity of relationship and in that position comes more easily to those that have that attitude, you know, take that approach. Yeah. Sorry.
No, totally.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say life's too short to work with people that you don't like being in a room with.
Wow. That is so true.
and that's what probably 95% of the battle comes down to.
Yeah.
And especially, I'm glad you said the word longevity because that's it. If you want to be more than a flash in a pan, and because you can have success the other way.
Sure.
But to have the stick aroundness, if that's a word, you know.
When it's not just longevity, it's life in balance because, I mean, you know, there are tons of people I could point to that, you know, like David Foster is very, I mean, he's very, I mean, it's in his book.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
And I mean, literally, I have a friend who was second engineering a session and said he walked in and, you know, the line was, is it hot in here or is it my career? Is it just my career, right? That, you know, that was like the, and he was sort of joking and sort of, you know, like, hey, I am hot, you know? So, but I think the, you know, sometimes the whole creative pursuit, it seems so important sometimes, you know? It seems so like, you know, like it's bigger than life. And especially I've done, you know, all my stuff has been just contemporary Christian music. So you have this other sort of kingdom element, you know, and you feel like you're impacting and you're having, you know, you're sort of creating a culture of influence and change and stuff. And really, that's all good, you know, but if we're going to talk about ministry, my one thing it took me about 10 or 12 years to learn was my biggest ministry was to, you know, have a good marriage and, you know, like be there for my family, which I really wasn't the first 10 to 12 years. Sure. I was just like consumed. And when I think of longevity, I'm not talking about just being hired for 40 years. I'm talking about having life in balance and in perspective, keeping things in perspective, which I did very poorly, you know?
Sure.
But by God's grace and the fact that my wife found a big enough 2x4 to get my attention, you know, at some point, you know, it's, you know, God, you know, we came around.
Well, with building a career and building a family and all of those things happening at the same time, what kind of shift or adjustments did you have to make family more of a priority?
Come home. Go home. And honestly, I've learned more from like guys like Seth, Ben Shive, Ian Fitchick, you know, just different guys like sort of the younger generation. I don't know if you feel young, but you are young.
Sure.
Just in the larger picture. And I don't know, it's like I feel like there's more of an awareness of that now. I grew up, when my mom would always do the dishes and always did the housework.
Sure.
And my dad would, after dinner, just, he loved my mom.
Yeah.
He bought a $2,000 used engraving machine to make a little plaque that said, "I love you, baby," and put it above the sink where she was washing the dishes,
Wow.
But, it's like a different culture. Now this culture is like there's way more engagement and involvement and kind of awareness of that. So I've learned a lot just by watching younger guys prioritize their time. So to me, it's about all you have is 24 hours a day. So, you should try to rest, because there's probably more creative juice in the fact of getting rest and engaging in life outside the studio than staying there another 4 or 5 or 6 hours. There's, it's just going to be fresh when you come back. So there's a lot of wisdom that I've picked up from younger people.
I think that there's a growing trend and a word that I've not heard until the last couple of years, just work-life balance. That phrase
absolutely
is a big part of, if you're going to have a career, have some longevity, you have to be able to balance those out or something's going to give.
It's going to give. Yeah. It just is. And you pay a price somewhere if it's out of balance.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm glad people are more aware of that, because it's just not worth it, man. Life is too short.
Yeah, that's true.
On your theme, it's just too short not to enjoy all aspects of it.
Sure. And it is, you touched on a good point that a lot of the times, and what we do is important as creators and producers and songwriters and anybody in music, whether it's behind the scenes. But it's another one of our guests said that there's no such thing as a musical emergency. And I thought that was really cool. At the end of the day, it's important and music changes lives, but nothing trumps.
But I guarantee you have answered that 911 call.
Yeah.
In your career, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you felt like it before, or somebody has sort of communicated that.
Yeah.
But it's really true.
Yeah. So, and that's not to downplay the importance of it, but it is to say that, it's perspective. Put everything in put everything in perspective. And me having a baby recently has done that a lot. And I, thank God, married a woman who does not put up with bull crap and will pull out the 2x4 when needed.
That's a blessing, man. Just count your blessings.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
Yeah. So.
Now, there's got to be some statistic out there that behind every successful man is a powerful
2x4.
That's it right there.
Oh man. Well, again, it's sort of the older generation, but when we were first married, when Debbie and I were first married for the first, 5 to 7 years, I was just not home. I just wasn't home much. And, her dad would say, well, you just need to make home a happy place to be. Don't complain, be tough, just hang in there and make it a happy place to be, and he'll be home. And then I still didn't come home. It's like, so she was great, thinking she was like doing what she was supposed to be doing. But, she got healthy and it's like, wait a minute, that's a bunch of crap, That's a bunch of crap. To have a marriage, there have to be two of us,
Yeah.
And we liked each other, but, it was just.
You told me a story really recently, and maybe you don't even want to share this for our listeners, but maybe you do. I just thought it was a very powerful thing for me to sum that whole thing up, because you talked about, I don't know, for a lot of listeners out there, there's a really talented artist out there named Ellie, happens to be your daughter.
Yeah, Ellie Holcomb.
Ellie Holcomb. And do you care to share a little bit of that story and maybe?
Well, it really ties into what we were talking about, because it took me 10 or 12 years to kind of wake up, get a clue, go, oh, okay, all right, I have to make some changes. It came, honestly, most of us that do this job, we're perfectionists. You have this perfectionistic thing.
Sure.
And
That's why people hire us.
yeah, that's right. Because you just hold the bar really high. And one of my counselor, when we went through counseling, one of the things she said is you have to learn to lower your expectations. And I'm like, nope, that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me.
Sure.
But now, in perspective, I realize, what she was saying is, it's never going to be 100%.
Right.
It's just the nature of it.
Sure.
So any artist, any writer, I can't look at any project and go, well, I got that totally 100% right.
Wow.
I always see ways it could be better. So because of that tendency, you're going to always keep trying to make it better, right? Mm-hmm. So it did take me a while to sort of, I think it was more like turning the Titanic around. And to me, any kind of change, it's not like, you're not going to change anything overnight, are you? I mean, it's like, it takes time to really change.
Yeah.
Sure.
It doesn't happen quick. So hopefully there's just not a big iceberg,
Sure.
ahead of you in your path. So anyway, over the next 10 years, I think I was like learning to kind of like turn it around, and it's painful and hard and all that. And when Ellie went to college, I remember, we all stood in the foyer. We have 5 kids, so Debbie and 5 kids, and Ellie's the oldest. So she went to college, and we all stood and cried, and we're in the foyer, and we took her to college, and just this big rush. You move her in, came home. I look up I could see her bedroom from, my bedroom, like through a courtyard and upstairs over a deck, and the lights were on. I thought, oh man, the lights are on, but she's not there. And it was just a really like, whoa, it kind of hit me.
Wow.
Like, wow, she is like, I know what happened to me when I went to college. I never came home. I mean, I know people come home now, but it's just the economy.
Sure.
So that happened. Then my second one, who's more compliant and passive and peaceful and just kind of like goes with the flow, Ben, he went to college, and it wasn't as big a hoopla and send-off and all that. And I came home, and I was so excited when he was going to come home 6 weeks later, and a musical emergency came up. And I had to be pretty much working the whole weekend. I allowed myself to do that, to be swept into it. And afterwards, he went back to college. I told my counselor, I said, I am so pissed because I missed. I allowed myself to. He said, well, just call him. Just call him and say, tell him how you feel. So I called him. It took 3 voicemails full of, I'm so sorry. I apologize. Forgive me. I hate that we missed. I won't let it happen again. And I love you. And I just hate that I missed it. And I didn't hear from Ben. Weeks and weeks went by. I finally called him. I said, "Do you ever get my voicemail?" He said, "I listen to him every day."
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Like I've listened to it like 60 times or whatever,
Wow.
And I may be exaggerating. May have said 50, but he listened to it over and over again. And so anyway, it's all kind of ties in with the fact that I missed out on a lot of their growing up years. And, man, you can't get that back.
Sure.
Wow.
So music was sort of that wedge and passion, and even though we had friendly relationships, amicable relationships, I still missed it. So fast forward, Ellie's 30. She's been on the road with Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors, her husband, Drew, and she finally just feels like, man, I've got something I want to say and want to do. And Drew's like, man, I'm firing you from the band. Go do this. and so she asked me to produce it. And I cannot tell you how much joy and laughter, tears of just like happy tears through that whole process there were. And just sort of a celebration of God like restoring what the locusts have eaten. Because the thing that kept us apart now, 30 years, fast forward 30, several decades, it was also the thing that, like like bonded us again and just like brought us back together.
Sure.
Not that we hadn't gone through healing and stuff, but it was a very healing thing. And that's just a testament to the Lord, you know, just that whole redemptive process.
Yeah.
And but I would encourage anybody that's listening, man, life is life, and producing is not life. It's just a piece of it.
Sure.
You know, so keep it in balance, keep it in check.
I've got 2 kids of my own, and my son is 9 this year. And it's
Wow.
almost a daily thing with me of thinking like, okay, if he goes to college at 18, he's halfway done now.
Isn't that crazy?
And it seems like it's
So you
been the
think
blink
about
of
that
an
a
eye.
lot.
It's constantly on my brain, and so I've really upped the living room wrestle time.
I love it.
Stuff like that, just because I know that in a few years he's going to have other responsibilities or not want to hang out with dad.
Yep.
So those
It
moments
all
are,
happens. They're precious.
Yeah.
You know, and it's and the key, you know, people are always saying, "What's this? How do I do it? What's the key to being successful at it?" Just thinking about it,
Sure.
and having it at the forefront of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then it just naturally happens.
Yeah.
So you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
We always tell our daughter, I mean, she's only 14 months old now, but we always say that, you know, if you never want to do anything in life, if you just want to stay home with mom and dad until you're 40, that's okay.
She won't.
She won't. But that's what we tell her right now. So
I'm with you, man. It goes so fast.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Does seem like it does.
And just when you start to get sad about, okay, now the kids are all gone. They have grandkids, and you know you have grandkids, and it's like that's the real payoff.
Yeah. Yeah. How many grandkids? at
We
this
have
point?
4.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty
Great.
awesome.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for
Absolutely
joining us today, man.
I feel like we
this was
talked
awesome.
about more philosophically, you know, as opposed to like the ins and outs of music.
Hey,
But
well, I think you can talk about that stuff, but honestly, we talk a lot about the why behind of why you do what you do is a lot more
That's
important
good.
than the what and the how.
that's good.
So I think that really, really, at least to me, I learned a lot just by this conversation, and I was encouraged just by hearing that from you. So
Good.
Well, I think
That's
whether
good.
you're a seasoned music professional or you saw in iTunes that Brown Bannister is going to be interviewed, or you're new to the music industry and you're trying to hear from people that have been there before, that it's so much more than just the education or the experience
Yeah.
behind the board or
Yeah.
learning how to write a song. That so much of it is life, and
Yeah.
life's what happens when you're making other plans, kind of thing.
Yeah,
And so
that's good.
I think this is just as valuable, if not more so, than getting nitty gritty into what kind of equipment do you use and what are you really looking forward to as far as the future stuff coming down the pike. So that's exactly what this
That's good, man.
podcast is about.
Good. That's good. Then you guys you're doing good work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So are you, sir.
well,
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
I appreciate it.
Hey, we hope you've enjoyed this episode and will join us again soon on the Full Circle Music Show, the why of the music biz.
Check us out at fullcirclemusic.org/podcast.